Let me tell you about a night at Costco that changed everything for me. Working there was never my dream job, but it had its perks. Late shifts were quiet, easygoing, and I liked the people I worked with. We'd joke around, unpack boxes, and the time would just fly by. That was until one evening flipped my whole perception upside down. We were about to close Costco. The vast space was echoing more with our footsteps than the usual hustle of shoppers. That's when Rick, the manager, a no-nonsense kind of guy who'd seen it all, looked worried. He motioned me over with a serious look I've never seen before. "We might have a bit of trouble," he whispered, nodding towards a woman who was making a beeline past the cash registers, her coat oddly puffed up. We thought it'd be straightforward. Approach her, ask her to come with us quietly, and sort it out like we always do. Only the moment we touched her shoulder, she turned and, with a wild look in her eyes, bit Rick's arm. The shock of it had us stumbling back. I managed to pull her off, and together, we half-dragged, half-coaxed her to the security office upstairs. That office was cramped, cluttered space, filled with the hum of monitors and the faint smell of stale coffee. We thought the hard part was over, but as we started filling out the incident report, she found a box cutter we'd missed during our initial check. In a heartbeat, she slashed at her wrists. The horror of that moment froze me. Blood started pooling on the floor, a vivid, shocking contrast to the drab office ambiance. She wasn't done. With a terrifying scream, she came at us, the box cutter in one bloodied hand. Rick and I, we didn't think, we just ran. We bolted out of there, and the sound of her following us was a nightmare I couldn't shake off. We slammed the door behind us, hoping and praying that she wouldn't find a way out. Dialing 911, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone, but she, driven by desperation or madness, climbed into the ceiling. The thought of her, injured and crazed, hiding somewhere in the store's infrastructure was chilling. We had to evacuate the entire store. Customers and staff were left standing in the parking lot, wrapped in confusion in the cold night air. The wait was excruciating. Imagining her above us, maybe watching, maybe waiting, added a surreal edge to the fear. When the police and fire departments finally found her and brought her down, there was this collective breath of relief. Yet, seeing her with a mix of defiance and defeat in her eyes, I felt a pang of something like sorrow. This whole escalation over a stolen item felt tragic. After that day, you can say life at Costco went back to normal, or as normal as it could be. The store almost felt altered, shadows seemed darker, and an unspoken tension hummed through the aisles for me. We, the staff, shared glances that spoke volumes about the terror we'd witnessed. I kept thinking about her, about what desperation drove her to that edge. It was a grim reminder of how quickly things can spiral and how the line between a regular day and an outright chaos is thinner than we think. Eventually, I left that job working at Costco. The echoes of that night lingered too heavily. Nevertheless, I frequently find myself reflecting on it and the lessons it taught me about human fragility and resilience. It's a story I share, not for shock, but as a testament to the unpredictable, often hidden narratives we all carry. That night at Costco shattered the quiet routine I took for granted, leaving a lasting impression on me. Night shifts at Costco always came with a quiet kind of solitude, something I'd grown to appreciate. That silence, though, turned suffocating one stormy evening, flipping my world upside down in a way I hadn't thought possible in the aisles of a wholesome store. The shift started as any other, but unease settled in when I stumbled upon an unsettling scene in aisle 7. The forklift Jamie was supposed to be operating stood abandoned. The keys dangled from the ignition, swinging slightly as if someone had rushed off. Jamie's clipboard, usually clutched tight or neatly placed on the dashboard, lay discarded on the ground, papers fluttering in the draft. A chill ran through me. not from the storm, but from something far more ominous. "Jamie?" I called out, my voice echoing off the warehouse walls, feeling suddenly too loud and yet unheard. There was no response, only the low rumble of thunder in the distance, mocking my growing panic. The radio clipped to my belt felt heavier as I reached for it, my call for Jamie crackling into static. With each step I took, retracing Jamie's last known path, the air grew colder and the shadows deeper. I found more signs of Jamie's sudden departure: a spilled box of cereal, a hastily overturned cart. It looked like chaos had erupted in the middle of a routine task. Then, the unmistakable signs of a struggle: a scuff on the floor, a smear of blood so out of place against the sterile concrete. It screamed of danger. My heart skipped. This was no simple mishap. Something had gone terribly wrong. Panic clawed at my throat as I ventured further, the storm morphing from the workplace I knew into a maze of fear. Each aisle seemed to hold its breath, the usual comforting familiarity replaced by a growing sense of dread. The emergency lights flickered, casting shadows that danced like specters, playing tricks on my eyes. Or so I hoped. The trail led to the back exit, which was left open, an invitation to the howling chaos of the storm outside. It was an exit rarely used. Its sudden openness was a silent testament to the urgency of Jamie's disappearance. Standing there, the cold air biting at my skin, I felt a profound isolation, as if the storm had swallowed us whole, leaving no trace of Jamie behind but the echoes of a struggle. The wait for the police was agonizing, with each minute stretching into eternity. The warehouse, once a place of order and routine, now felt haunted by the unknown. Questions swirled into the tempest of my mind. Had I missed something? Could I have prevented this? In the aftermath, as days turned into weeks with no sign of Jamie, the weight of his absence bore down on us all. The whispers among the staff spoke of fear, of loss, and of the unsettling truth that safety is but an illusion, easily shattered by the unforeseen and the unexplainable. Leaving Costco behind wasn't just about seeking a new start. It was an acknowledgement that some echoes, some shadows, are too deep to outrun. Sharing Jamie's story is a reminder of the fragility of our everyday lives, a call to never take for granted the quiet, the routine, and the sense of normalcy we weave around ourselves. Because sometimes it's in the silence that we find our deepest fears lurking, waiting to surface. It was a regular Thursday night shift at Costco, the kind where the buzz of the fluorescent lights felt like the only sound in the world. That night, however, the mundane routine was shattered, leaving a void that echoed with questions and fears long after. Mia was always a spark of energy that kept us going through those long night shifts. So, when she didn't return from her break, confusion quickly turned into worry. At first, we thought maybe the storm had caused some delay, but when I found her personal items, a phone and a tattered book she always carried, abandoned near the back exit, I knew something was terribly wrong. The manager initiated a store-wide search, but it was the security footage that brought our search to a standstill. The grainy image showed Mia being forcibly led out of the back exit by an unidentified figure, her struggles faint echoes in the sterile corridors of the warehouse. The police were called, and the store became a hive of whispered fears and speculation. Watching that security footage over and over, we couldn't make out who took Mia. The more we dug into it, the darker things got. We started to see signs that maybe Mia was caught up in something terrible, something like human trafficking. It was like a switch flipped, and finding Mia became not just important, but urgent. Feeling a personal responsibility to find Mia, I pored over every detail of that night, reaching out to anyone who might have seen something, anything. The community rallied, vigils were held, and Mia's story spread, igniting a larger conversation about safety and vigilance. Days turned into weeks with no signs of Mia. The store tried to return to normal, but the shadows lingered longer. A constant reminder of the friend and coworker we had lost. It was in these shadows that I vowed to keep looking, to not let Mia become just another unsolved case. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. An anonymous tip led to a raid on a suspected trafficking ring. The operation was broadcast live, a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. Even though the big raid didn't bring Mia back, it did give us something, a trail to follow, and hope that we could still find her. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep us going and to keep us believing we might bring her home someday. This story doesn't wrap up neatly. Mia's still out there, and we haven't stopped looking. But it's not just about Mia anymore. It's about shining a light on something dark, about doing whatever we can to make sure what happened to Mia doesn't happen to anyone else. Her disappearance has sparked a bigger fight against human trafficking, and in a way, that's keeping her spirit alive, driving us to save others, even as we hold out hope for her return. As I left Costco for the last time, turning my badge in, I realized that the world had shifted. The innocence of believing in a safe haven had been replaced by the knowledge of how quickly darkness can descend, taking with it the light of a bright young soul like Mia's. It was around 10 p.m. I was tasked with shutting down the deli section when a scream shattered the silence, echoing through the empty aisles of Costco. The noise appeared to come from the meat department, a normally quiet section at this hour. Instinctively, I headed towards the source, my footsteps quick and sharp against a cold, hard floor. The closer I got, the more pronounced the odd, metallic smell became. A tang of blood mixed with the stale air of the freezer section. Pushing through the plastic curtain in the meat locker, I stopped dead in my tracks. Carl, the night janitor, stood by the old meat grinder, pale as the ghostly vapors of frost exhaling from the machine. His eyes were wide with fright as he pointed to the grinder. It's turned itself on," he stuttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Looking at the grinder, I could see fresh blood dripping onto the floor, pooling in the tiled floor's uneven crevices. The machine hummed and groaned, as if digesting something sinister. I moved closer, against my better judgment, to inspect the source of the blood. That's when I saw it, a piece of fabric, unmistakably from a Costco uniform, caught in the feeder of the grinder. My heart raced as I turned to Carl. "Did you see anyone else here?" I asked, hoping he'd say no. He shook his head, confirming my fear that whatever happened involved someone from our crew. We needed to act fast. I pulled out my phone to dial 911, my hands trembling as I described the horror unfolding to the dispatcher. "Please hurry," I urged. "Something terrible is happening." As we waited for the police to arrive, the grinder sputtered and coughed, spitting out more fabric and bones. It was clear now. The grinder hadn't been used for meat in the traditional sense tonight. Someone had used it to dispose of a body. The police and emergency services arrived within minutes that felt like hours. They cordoned off the area, treating the meat department like a crime scene out of a horror movie. They questioned Carl and me, taking our statements as they attempted to piece together the gruesome puzzle. The store was closed the following day, and the news of the incident was kept quiet, managed carefully by Costco's corporate office. But whispers of what happened traveled fast among the staff. The knowledge that someone we worked with could have met such a brutal end haunted us all. I couldn't shake the image of the grinder turning itself on, as if it were hungry, waiting for its next victim. It was too much. I handed in my resignation the next week. The echoes of that night's terror lingering in my mind each time I closed my eyes. Now, whenever I pass by a Costco, especially at night, a chill runs down my spine. I can't help but remember the horror of that night, the scream, The blood, the relentless grinding of the machine, and the undeniable fear that something monstrous had been lurking among us, hidden in plain sight. Working the late shift at Costco usually meant a quiet evening, so the loud crash of the back storage room was startling. It was just past 10 p.m., and the store was mostly empty, and the monotone hum of the freezers blending with the soft patter of rain outside. Grabbing a flashlight, I headed towards noise, watching the beam of light cut through the corridor's darkness. As I approached the storage room, a metallic tang filled the air, the temperature dropping with each step closer. Rounding the corner, I found the source of the disturbance. A heavy-duty toolbox had tipped over, and its contents, a mix of screwdrivers, wrenches, and other tools, strewn across a concrete floor. Next, I noticed a trail of red droplets leading to the far wall, where Mike, a night janitor, lay slumped against it. Blood from a deep gash on his arm soaked through his uniform. "Mike!" I rushed over, my own heart pounding in my ears. He was pale, his breathing shallow. "What happened?" "Tried to fix it," he muttered, his eyes glazed with pain, nodding weakly towards a dark corner of the room. Following his gaze, I hesitated as my flashlight settled on a twisted shape amidst the shadows. An old, broken guitar. Its strings snapped, and its body stained with dark spots that I now understood to be blood. "It just slipped," Mike continued, trying to sit up. "The strings, they snapped." I dialed 911, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation. "We need an ambulance at Costco. It's urgent," I said, applying pressure to his wound to slow the bleeding. Paramedics arrived quickly, taking over from me as he prepped Mike for transport. He was in shock, repeatedly mumbling about the guitar and how it seemed to lash out as he attempted to move it aside. After the paramedics took Mike to the hospital, management sealed off the storage room and later decided to dispose of the damaged guitar, citing it as a safety hazard. The staff circulated rumors about its origins and the unusual circumstances of the accident, but ultimately, they chalked it up to a freak workplace injury. The incident left us all shaken, reminding us that even the most ordinary nights could turn perilous. The store returned to its usual rhythm, but the echoes of that night lingered, a stark reminder of the unpredictability hidden within seemingly mundane tasks.